Hey guys, sous vide has become a home kitchen essential over the past few years, providing restaurant quality results at an ever more affordable price point. So you got one for Christmas or for yourself after mixing wine and Amazon. Now what? How about steaks cooked perfect medium rare edge to edge? How about impossibly tender, flavorful pork belly? How about safe to eat cookie dough? Let's get down to basics. Alright guys, so the first thing we're going to be looking at is one of the classic utilizations of sous vide, and that is for pork belly, which we'll be putting to good use in our ramen episode coming up soon. So for our marinade, we're rough chopping up a few cloves of garlic, a few inches of peeled ginger, and 1 or 2 green onions that we're going to place into a bowl, along with 1/2 of 1 cup of soy sauce and 1/2 of 1 cup of Mirin, which is a kind of Japanese cooking wine and one of the secrets as to why their dishes taste so good. We're also going to add about 1/4 cup of fish sauce and 1/2 cup of plain white sugar. Seems like a lot, but just trust me, have I ever let you down before? We're going to whisk all this stuff together and then optionally slam a big old piece of pork belly down onto the table. We've got minimal prep to do here. We're just going to roll it up like a big old carpet of meat. Once we've got one end tucked underneath the other, we're going to grab some butcher twine and tie this guy down. We're simply going to snip off a length of twine and then tie it around the pork belly using a surgeon's knot, which is not as cool as it sounds. It's just a square knot with an extra initial turn. But since we're vacuum sealing this, you can tie it with virtually any knot and it's going to be just fine. Tie every 1/2 inch or so, trim off the extra twine, and it's time to give this pork belly a bath within a bath. We're sealing it up with our marinade, making sure to turn it a few times to evenly coat, and then very cautiously sucking the air out with our vacuum sealer. Stop. Alternately, you can put this guy in a large Ziploc bag and dunk the whole bag into the water to push the air out, if you don't want to inevitably ruin your vacuum sealer with a whole bunch of liquid. We're rolling this around a bit to make sure the marinade is evenly dispersed, and then dropping in our sous vide at 170 degrees Fahrenheit for 6 to 8 hours. Alternately, if you want a firmer, more fork and knife pork belly, you can leave it in there at 155 degrees Fahrenheit for 24 hours. We'll finish this up in a few weeks during our hotly anticipated ramen video, where we'll be slicing this thin and plating it up in a nice steaming bowl of tonkatsu. But for now, why don't we take a look at the lighter, more playful side of sous vide, edible cookie dough made with pasteurized eggs. That's right, you can make perfectly edible raw eggs at home by putting them in the hot tub at 135 degrees Fahrenheit for 2 hours. Plunge them into an ice bath and then use them as you would in any recipe, in this case, Grandma Babish's down-home country-style brown butter chocolate chip cookies. Now you might notice that, whoa, how did that happen? Sorry, you might notice that your eggs have become kind of cloudy, which might look less appetizing, but they should still function in their roles as eggs, which is in this case giving us a whole batch of safe or straight-to-mouth cookie dough that is sure to wow your friends, family, and men's choir, or whoever you hang out with. You can even theoretically bake this as you would normal cookies. You might end up with some textural differences, but that is the price that you gotta pay if you want to become Instagram famous. Now, we simply can't do a sous vide episode without a big old f***off steak. So that's what I got right here, a 2-inch thick, dry-aged porterhouse that I'm vacuum sealing with a clove of garlic and a few sprigs of fresh herbs, rosemary and thyme. The temperature of the sous vide is obviously going to depend on how you like your steak done, but the general consensus seems to be that 125 degrees Fahrenheit is perfect for a rare medium rare. If you want medium rare, shoot for more like 130. It's probably going to come up about 5 degrees Fahrenheit during the searing process. Because of the thickness of the steak, we're letting it go for about 2 hours, but no more than 2.5. If you want to go longer than 2.5 hours, if you've got a cheap cut of meat that you want to tenderize, go a little higher in temperature, over 130 degrees Fahrenheit. Once the time is up, take the steak out of the hot tub, and then we're doing a super hot sear in cast iron. We are removing but reserving the herbs and garlic clove, and we're hitting some extremely hot cast iron with a bit of oil. We want it as smoking hot as possible because we want to sear this as quickly as possible without overcooking the interior that we've so carefully kept at our desired temperature. We're also generously salting and peppering this steak, which we could have done before we put it in the water bath, but I forgot, so we're doing it now. And then it's out of the sous vide and into the frying pan. Sorry. And we're blasting this with all the heat we can give it for about 90 seconds or until a beautiful brown crust forms. I hope you have aloof smoke detectors because it's going to get pretty smoky in here. If your steak has a fat cap, it is also vitally important to remember to sear it because sous vide does not render and soften fat the same way that traditional cooking methods do. Towards the end of searing the second side, we're going to give this guy its butter and herb baste. Drop the herbs from the vacuum bag and a generous pat of butter into the side of the pan. I've also got some bacon fat here, which I really hope by this point, if you've been watching the show, that you're starting to save in your fridge. And we're simply going to baste the bubbling hot fat over top of the steak. Once you've got a nice brown crust, it's time to take it off the heat and carve it up. Now, if we were cooking this steak using traditional methods, we would want to wait at least 10 minutes before cutting into it. But since the muscle fibers aren't all tensed up from the trauma of being cooked constantly under high heat, we can cut in almost immediately. With a porterhouse, you've got a tenderloin on one side and a New York strip on the other, so I am cutting those away from the bone before lining them up and slicing them into manageable pieces. The sort of French brasserie way to serve up this steak is to remove and slice up the New York strip and the tenderloin and fan them out by the bone in their original locations. Now that, my friends, is how you make a steak. One that I'm very excited to make again for the live stream next week. Same Babish time, same Babish place.